This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical or health advice. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice, nor have the statements been evaluated by the US FDA or similar international bodies. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of information shared during this podcast. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host. Greetings, health and human enthusiasts, and welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm your trusted guide, Dr. Scott Johnson, and I'm both humbled and thrilled that you've chosen to join me on this fearless pursuit of knowledge and inspiration. My mission is to elevate your well-being naturally, arming you with evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and impactful health tactics. But that's not all. Together, we'll dive deep into the mysterious realms of human existence, unraveling the secrets of what makes us truly thrive. This podcast isn't just about information. It's a catalyst for change. Join me in confidently exploring potent natural solutions, cutting-edge health strategies, and igniting courageous conversations that cultivate meaningful connections and foster empathy for humankind. I'm here to empower you to unleash your extraordinary potential and lead a life jam-packed with boundless health and happiness. So get ready. Your extraordinary journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast, where we share tips to help you live a happier and healthier life. There is a deep connection between body systems, and this includes the immune and the nervous system. That is why a branch of medicine known as neuroimmunology, or the study of how the immune system affects the nervous system, exists. That is today's topic, and so we're going to dive into both neuroscience and immunology, but we'll strive to keep it understandable as always. That's why I've invited an expert in the topic, Dr. Stephanie Poe. Over the past 8 years, Stephanie has empowered thousands of women to take care of themselves emotionally, physically, and spiritually. In working one-on-one with clients, Stephanie has established a method of helping individuals uncover what is holding them back and why repeated patterns of backsliding are present. She sees her current work as bridging the gap between modern and holistic medicine, empowering herself and others to take an active part in their health by listening to and understanding their own body. She holds a PhD in immunology from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, is a mom of 2 boys, and has empowered thousands of women to take steps forward into healing their nervous system. So welcome, Stephanie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it's not a topic that I think most people probably think of because it tends to be complex when you're uniting 2 body systems together that we're going to be discussing.
Amen.
So I think that's the first thing I want to talk about is, can you just explain what neuroimmunology is and how it explores the connection between the nervous system and the immune system?
So it's the study of the immune system and the study of the nervous system and how the 2 of those things interact. And I think there's a couple of different ways I like to describe this. So one, we've all heard that term stress disease connection. So
Right.
In my study of immunology, as it pertains to, working one-on-one with clients, every single time I look at a human, I'm always asking myself the question, how able is their body in the state that it's in right now? Able to communicate with itself, with its nervous system, with its immune system. And so that stress disease connection, when we're stressed, the communication breaks down.
And I think that's important to understand that I think far too often when we're not in our best healthy state, people automatically look at what do I need to change physically? But you also need to look at what's happening mentally and emotionally. You need to look at your body holistically and look at all aspects of it, because you cannot affect something physically that doesn't also affect the body mentally and emotionally. And I also like the concept of this communication, because body systems are constantly communicating. And in fact, we're to the point now that we know that there are actually microbes inside our body that are communicating with these body systems as well, or microbiomes that are found throughout the body communicating. So that's another fascinating aspect of human health that I think we probably are just seeing the tip of the iceberg and are going to continue to explore. And kind of leads me right into my next question, which is, how does the two-way communication between the body and the brain influence our overall health and well-being?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So if we take a step back, right, and think about the body and the brain and the two-way communication that's always happening. First of all, it's really important to identify the fact that it's happening via something known as the vagus nerve or cranial nerve 10. Okay, so that is the main nerve that is running from our brain to our body and from our body systems, our organs, back to our brain. So you can think of that like it's collecting all of the information from our organ systems, synthesizing that information, what's happening, what's going on, what resources are needed, and then basically telling the body how to react. So that's kind of the picture of what's happening. When that breaks down, when we can't sense what's going on in our body, or we have some sort of state or disease that's affecting it, it's known as interoception. You can imagine that life becomes really difficult, right? Disjointed, not knowing how to react, not being able to, organs aren't getting what they need, and kind of the overall state of our body becomes very stressed. So we begin to not trust our body. And that's something that I like to really help people understand, is when we live in a state of trust with our body, our nervous system is healthier, our immune system is healthier, and therefore we are healthier.
When you say trust, can you expound on that a little bit? Because that's an interesting term to use when you're talking about with your body. Are we talking about trusting that our body has the ability to maintain homeostasis, or what do you mean by that?
So simply put, like what I mean by that, I love that you wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, by the way. So it's super, super simple. Does our body trust that when it sends hunger cues, we're going to feed it? When we're thirsty, do we give it water? When we need to use the restroom, do we take time to go? We all know when we're busy, when we're stressed, we're not listening to those hunger, satiety, thirst, those signals. Are we sleeping when we need to sleep? Are we moving our body when we need to move it? And so doing those just 5 really simple things makes a profound impact on our health. And it's so simple, but we can really go there, and that develops trust within our body. And that's definitely part of that two-way communication channel. If our body is screaming at us through our vagus nerve and we're not listening, the brain is kind of like, it needs to listen, but it's not listening, right?
That's a great way to explain that, and I think that we as individuals have to trust that our body's capable of doing things that it needs to be done, but we also need to have that body that's trusting us back and saying, okay, they're taking care of us and they're going to do the things that are appropriate for me to be healthy. So it's an interesting concept to explore. We talked about earlier that, you mentioned stress. Stress can interfere with so many body systems, the immune system being one of them for sure, that it can be disrupted significantly. We get more sick when we're stressed. And so how does chronic stress affect the interaction that you're seeing between this immune system and the nervous system? And can this lead to or exacerbate neurological or immune disorders?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're stressed, right? Stress is good. So I think it's really important to think about stress in 2 different ways. So stress is good. It's a signal to our body that our body needs to act, to respond, or to do something that is known kind of in common language, like to fight or to flee, right? We have a little bit of stress, so our body responds. And what happens is cortisol increases. That's our main stress hormone. And when we're in fight or flight and we need to respond, the role of cortisol is actually to decrease other body functions. So we think about our digestive tract, right? When we're in, like, we need to respond, we're no longer hungry, right? Our digestive tract shuts down. The other thing that happens is our immune system is actually suppressed because our body needs the nutrients or the resources, the energetic resources to fight or to flee. Okay. So the brain is basically telling the body, okay, don't do anything that we don't need to do right now. So cortisol is actually good. And what happens though, when we have too much cortisol in our body and our immune system is chronically suppressed, all the ways in which the immune system is functioning behind the scenes, not just in the context of like an acute disease where we need the immune system to respond, it's not actually doing all of the things like sensing cellular health issues that may be popping up, right? Like surveying what's going on, providing resources, responding to little bits of injuries, right? So we have a situation in which all sorts of things can start to go wrong. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's known as the cortisol switch. Yeah. So prolonged stress is actually like creates that chronic low level inflammation that's in our body all the time. And then because of high levels of cortisol chronically, our immune system's not actually able to respond. So one of the things that I really, really, really want to make sure that the audience understands is when we talk about immune health, it's actually the ability of our immune system to respond when necessary and to not respond when it's no longer necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's both.
It's a delicate balance. It really is, because you don't want a hypo or an ineffective response, but you don't want it to be hyper either, because if it's overactive, then that causes problems too. And you really do need to get that delicate balance to occur. And I like that you mentioned that not all stress is bad. That was similar. Several episodes ago, I had Dr. Stephen Sidoroff on, and he talked about stress and said the same thing. Stress is not always a bad thing. It's something that can help compel us to get things done and to get move things forward. But if it's chronic, then it's a problem. It's when it doesn't reset after we've had the good stress that it becomes problematic for us. Most of my listeners and followers on social media do so because of my essential oil books. And so I'm going to have to ask an essential oil question as part of the podcast.
Shouldn't you be answering those?
Well, I like to get different perspectives, because how much do we know about essential oils right now? We're still learning and so much about them. And I've dedicated over 12,000 hours of study to them. So yeah, I could be considered an expert in what we currently know, but it doesn't mean I know everything. The question I have for you is, what is the scientific basis behind the use of essential oils in neuroimmunology? And are there specific essential oils that you found to positively affect brain and immune health?
So I'm actually going to say that this is a little bit of a trick question for me. So I'm going to go back to what we already talked about, this two-way communication between our brain and our body and our body and our brain and the vagus nerve. And so I have had quite the healing journey myself, right? Learning to sense my body, kind of somatic healing. Somatic means body. So all those buzzwords right there about somatic healing, it just means body. Get into your body, exercise, move, right? Feel, sense, do those things. Actually listen when you're hungry, thirst. So when I started studying the vagus nerve, I became very interested in something that's known as polyvagal theory, created by Stephen Porges. Have you heard of that?
Just heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah. So it's basically the theory to explain how our vagus nerve functions and how we kind of switch that on-off switch between fight or flight or freeze, which is a little bit of a state of trauma, like the lowest level of being, or be activated into like that sympathetic fight or flight. Okay. So it's just the theory that describes the connection between all of those. And the vagus nerve is the central part of that. And so I was thinking about my journey in my body, how I've healed, the things that I did. And when I started studying the vagus nerve, and I've also been using essential oils throughout about the past, like kind of intensely 4 years, I realized that, and I've read this, that the only place the vagus nerve meets the outside world is actually through our olfactory bulb. And so there's studies in mice showing that when they inhale lavender, right, they have, less depressive behaviors. Their anxiety goes down in these mouse models. If you remove the olfactory bulb, the effects is no longer there.
Right.
So we know that our olfactory bulb matters. And when we think about that's the only place that the vagus nerve meets the outside world, it begins to get really interesting. So I actually developed something that I've called aromosoma. So instead of telling people, like I could go through, rosemary, right, is linked to cognition, improving, acetylcholine, which is required for the vagus nerve, all of those things, lavender. You know these things too. Menthol, right? It cools the skin. So our we're sensing the skin, right? And it's activating everything in that communication. But I actually like to encourage people, instead of me telling them what oil is going to work for a particular health concern, I encourage them to listen to their nose. So it's very different, because I believe that actually if their vagus nerve is innervating all the organs and it is communicating with them through the olfactory bulb, we have literally unlocked so much power when it comes to what does our body tell us that it needs right now, today, in this moment. What are we drawn to? Tomorrow it might change. We've got a different, root cause going on in our body tomorrow. And I've done this actually over and over and over again with my children. And it's been fascinating to watch what it is that they're drawn to, when, and why. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying it's a trick question, because I'm not going to sit here and say this for this, this for this. I'm going to say, what does your body tell you that you need in this moment, and go towards that oil.
That's something that I will often say to people as well, is there's definitely science and experience that can guide essential oil usage. But sometimes we have to go on intuition, because there's often times where I'm meeting with a client or in the clinic, or there's just somebody who's asking me a question, and I'll say, you know what, that hasn't been studied. So I'm not sure what the research or the science would say, but my intuition would tell me to do this. And I think people maybe sometimes ignore that intuition and experience what's going to happen by using that intuition. In my experience, many people often have a positive experience with essential oils, even if the quote unquote wrong oil was selected from the beginning.
Scientifically, there's so much overlap too, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I also love the concept of the olfactory bulb, because that has neural projections into the brain that obviously are going to have downstream effects of not just the nervous system, but also the endocrine system and other things within the body. And I'll say an interesting thing, something that I've always known, is that women actually have better olfactory systems than men do. They have much stronger olfactory systems because they have more olfactory receptors. But there's something interesting. Just this morning, I read a new study that was published this month that showed that lavender essential oil had a greater effect on reducing anxiety in women than it does in men when it was used either in a topical application as a massage to the hands and inhaled. And the researchers partly contributed that to that women likely have greater neural projections from the olfactory system into the brain that allows that greater response. So I thought that was pretty fascinating in that study that I read just this morning.
I'd be interested to see how they controlled that study, right? I mean, there's so many factors and differences between men and women, but
it was a crossover study. They did have more men in the study than women. I would consider it more a pilot study, because I think, if I remember it, there's 15 men and 12 women, so it's a smaller study. But it was crossover, and they did have a control that only had sweet almond oil massaged onto their hand, or simply sat in a room for 30 minutes with no lavender aroma being diffused. So it was, it definitely had some controls, and I think it was a fairly good study as far as its methodology. And another thing that I like is finding out what kind of dietary supplements might be effective for helping support us, and especially our nervous system and our immune system. So can you discuss the role of dietary supplements in supporting the body-brain connection, and which specific supplements have the most evidence supporting their efficacy in neuroimmunology?
Yeah, so I think before we dive into supplements, I would love to just discuss, if you don't mind, the role of like the gut health, the gut microbiome, and how that affects our immune system. Is it okay if we go there first?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And, I wrote a book just on the gut, and so I'd love to talk more about the gut.
Okay. Yeah. So this, I have a PhD in immunology, and I was in allergy and infectious disease, and spent a lot of time just thinking about how the immune system develops. And when it comes to the gut microbiome, it is so 70 to 80% of our immune system is actually in our gut, in our digestive tract. And it is taught to behave through the presence of a healthy microbiome. So
Right.
microbiome, bacteria that live in like basically in a symbiotic relationship with our, our intestinal lining, our skin, everywhere, but are constantly sending little love taps to our immune system, telling it, hey, we're here. Like bacteria is here, right? Think about this. Like we think bacteria is bad, but the bacteria is saying, hey, we're here. You don't need to respond. And so when it comes to health, the main concept that I always go to is how healthy we are, right? Is how able is our body able to heal. And what we need to heal from constantly is inflammation. Okay, inflammation is at the root of all disease. And the health of our microbiome and our digestive tract is literally the thing that controls the level of inflammation in our body.
Absolutely.
Because it's the brakes to our immune system. So obviously, if we don't have a healthy microbiome, you think about cases of antibiotics or, really not a diverse diet, or you're kept in a too sterile or clean environment. You're just not exposed to the microbes in the way that you need to in order to have an immune system that knows how to respond when necessary, but turn off when it's no longer needed. And so I just wanted to address that really, when we think about supplements and the health of our immune system and the health of our nervous system, what we are all as humans fighting against every single minute of every single day is inflammation. The communication is to control inflammation. So if we think about supplements, I'm just going to really simply go to like omega-3s, right? These really good anti-inflammatory fats. I read this book a long time ago called The Instinct to Heal by Dr. David Schreiber. And I read in there 50% of cases of postpartum depression can be reversed with a bioavailable source of omega-3s. And that fact was shocking to me, right? About to be mom, never really heard of this, omega-3s in our diet. Where do we get them today? So that's one thing that's really important. And omega-3s are also linked to the presence and the production of GABA, which is one of those neurotransmitters that prevents feelings of overwhelm. So again, gut health, interacting with microbes in our immune system, producing something like GABA, our nervous system is less reactive. We're calmer as a human. We have less stress and therefore less inflammation, right? It's just all of these things are so connected. So that's one that I would go to. Also, polyphenols, which is just this class of plant compounds, right, that are highly anti-inflammatory. Resveratrol is a common one of those. So that's, that should be in a supplement that you might want to take. And then outside of supplementation, I'm just going to say eat more plants, right? Soluble plant fiber feeds these good microbes in our gut and allows for the production of so many things that our immune system needs for its health, our nervous system needs for its health. And I'll even just say, because of what I said about being too clean, whatever, like eat more plants and then make sure they're dirty. Like if you can go dig in the dirt a little bit, that'll be awesome. So and so I wanted to address all that gut stuff before just jumping to supplements, because I would say probiotics, a good probiotic is also one of those supplements that like we really, really, our nervous system needs it. Our immune system needs it. We need a probiotic as a supplement. So what would you add? I'm curious.
No, I think those are all good. I really like omega fatty acids for their anti-inflammatory activity because they produce resolvins and protectins as byproducts as we metabolize them, which are highly anti-inflammatory. The probiotic is definitely something that is I'll often be asked if I can only take one supplement. I can only afford one supplement. What should I take? And I'll typically tell people a probiotic. You can actually affect your health more with a high quality probiotic than any other supplement that you can take. And there's great research showing that you should be doing that even from infancy. If we can get that infant's microbiome populated with a healthy microbiome from the beginning, they have far greater health outcomes mentally, physically, and emotionally as they age. I do like the polyphenols. Resveratrol is a great one. When we think about that, a lot of the benefits of wine is actually just due to the resveratrol. It's not actually the wine that's being drank. It's the resveratrol that's inside the wine, which is also found in grapes and grape juice. So you can get it in different ways. Others that I think about when I'm talking about the nervous system or brain health is I really like the mushroom lion's mane. There is some great research on lion's mane promoting good nervous system activity, good cognition, neurite outgrowth. So there's a lot of great research on that, and really most mushrooms also have a positive effect on your gut microbiome too. So you're getting a double effect there. So those are some of the ones that I think we're really aligned in a lot of the things that we do like to
this might
use.
sound naive, but I'm like, as the mushroom, I mean, I know there's properties in mushrooms, but also they tend to be dirty.
Yeah,
So,
they can be. Yeah. How about lifestyle choices? Because I really think lifestyle, you're generally a reflection of your lifestyle. And too many people want to look for quick fixes, whether it's a natural or a chemical from pharmaceuticals, to rescue them from things that they've done in their lifestyle, the choices they've made in their lifestyle. So what are the lifestyle choices, such as diet and exercise or sleep, that have the strongest impact on this neuroimmune connection?
Well, honestly, if everything comes back to inflammation, and I'm going to beat a dead horse here, right? Every single thing we put in our body feeds or fights disease. Everything we're surrounded with, including the nature of our relationships with the humans in our life, fights or feeds disease, right? Because they all impact our stress levels. So one bad night's sleep increases cortisol, right? So we're tripping stress into our life. So, when it comes to exercise, moving our body, right, releasing endorphins, when we feel better, we do better. And so I think what you said is very, very true, that if we're just thinking like, okay, what pill can I pop, like, to intervene in this, like, situation that I have going on, it's the wrong choice, right?
Yep.
Because we can't slap a pill on a lifestyle or chronic lifestyle behavior. We actually have to change all of those factors. And so I think something that, when it comes to helping people, like, where do you start? Because it's very overwhelming. And so I liked what you said, like, start with a probiotic, right? You're going to feel slightly better, then you're going to do better, right? Sleep is also one of those things that you can really attempt to tackle in a non-overwhelming way by giving yourself, like, better sleep habits. When you sleep more, you move more the next day, right? So all of those things are connected. So, I mean, on and on and on and on. But if we are just one human body, like, not brain body connection, right? Because you really can't separate the two. We're in one human body.
Yep.
And our main fight is against inflammation. Then instead of trying to, like, if we're a bouncy ball, right? You can kind of picture that. Instead of trying to poke one hole, like, stop one hole that's poked in that ball from leaking, you want to think about how you're actually filling up that bouncy ball, right? So it's like, how is your life set up to stay inflated? I'm not loving this analogy anymore, but I think you get the point, right? And so many of us are like, we're leaking out all of these holes, and then we're just constantly trying to patch them. And that feels very overwhelming. And so if we just go back, take a step back, it's really one thing that we're fighting against. It's inflammation. Let's set our life up. So, yeah, I mean, specific examples too. I mean, sleep, when we sleep, right, the neurons in our brain, they actually, like, squish out the junk.
Right.
And when it comes to being on some sort of healing journey or nervous system, that sleep cycle that we're in is so important. I'm just learning recently, right, the importance of dreaming in that REM stage. So if something, I mean, this is a little off topic, but if something traumatic happens to us in our life and our sleep cycle is messed up, we're not being given the gift of that recall during sleep, because that recall is actually our brain recalling traumatic events when we're in a safe state. Our body is no longer stressed. We're in a safe state. We're sleeping, reorganizing that information where it needs to go. So that's a whole other topic, but I wanted to throw that in there. So, yeah.
Sleep uses your brain and body, you as a human uses that sleep to process these traumatic experiences so that you don't have the same strong emotional responses when you're awake to those traumatic experiences. So it's really fascinating that all of these mechanisms that are just designed into the body for us to be healthy. Yeah. And we just continue to learn more and more through the study of human biology and physiology and psychology and everything else. Inflammation seems to be the hot topic tonight. And
I love that word.
I think that a lot of people just associate inflammation with pain. So say, oh, inflammation, I have an inflamed joint, and so that's why it's hurting. But you can actually have brain inflammation or neuroinflammation, and that can dramatically affect your mental and emotional health. In fact, a lot of good science is now coming out and showing that the neuroinflammation has a strong correlation with mental health disorders. So can you explain the connection between neuroinflammation and mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, and how can an understanding this relationship help in developing more effective treatments?
Hmm. So inflammation in our body, right, in our digestive tract, in our gut, right, teaches our immune system how to behave. And so if our immune system is not being taught to behave, we're going to have chronically more inflammation everywhere in our body, which leads to more stress, and it leads to more, like, our brain is disturbed, right? It's dealing with more stimuli coming from all parts of our body, our organs, everywhere. And so that inflammation or that pain, you can just think of it as like flooding sensations that our brain then begins to process. So that's how I think about things like depression, anxiety, other mental health disorders, is that our lifestyle and our body and the things that have happened to us are creating so many stimuli that they don't know where to go, and our brain has not had a chance to organize it yet into the right places. So we don't have the coping mechanisms. Not to mention, in the development of our nervous system, it's a really, really important thing that happens to us between ages 0 to 2, where our nervous system learns to come home or to be calm. We're embodied, and we learn that from our caregiver. So if something is happening between ages 0 to 2 where we are not given adequate co-regulation, right? We haven't learned to co-regulate with the presence of the caregiver. Our nervous system, as we grow into adulthood, doesn't know how to return to baseline or to come home to itself, to feel safe within our own body. And that's what happens when we're reaching for, substances to calm our emotions down, calm our brain down. We're numbing out. We need, specific behavior, so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that we see in people who have, depression and anxiety, is just the spinning brain with no ability to return home. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
It does.
Yeah.
And I think there's a strong correlation too with gut health, because as you mentioned earlier,
absolutely.
the gut creates these neurotransmitters. People think, oh, all my neurotransmitters are created in the brain, and it's not actually the case. About 90% of your serotonin is made inside your gut, and it makes GABA, like you mentioned earlier. It helps to produce acetylcholine. So there's all of these neurotransmitters or neuropeptides that are being produced to help support our mental and emotional health as well through the gut. And it's got its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, which has that vagus nerve as the communication line with the central nervous system. So there's so much that goes on in the gut that just makes it central really to our health. I like to say that the health really begins and ends in the gut. And so you've got to really put some emphasis on that. One of the things that you like to do is to unite holistic and conventional medicine, and you can get good outcomes by uniting the best of both worlds. So how can an integrative approach combining conventional medicine with lifestyle modifications and natural remedies enhance neuroimmunological health?
Well, yeah, overall health, I think a combination can be really healthy. I mean, if somebody is in a state where they're really not functioning, I think that modern medicine, pharmaceuticals, can be a huge blessing. I also think that those, this is bold of me to say, but should be a temporary fix on our way, as we're figuring out what's really going on. I mean, there is so much known now about the presence and the nature of our microbiome and those the metabolites you just talked about, GABA, serotonin. So really, when we begin to understand that, what we eat, the probiotics we take, our lifestyle, all of that's affecting inflammation, it's affecting our gut health. And when we understand, I mean, I don't know if I said this earlier or not, but the vagus nerve cannot transmit signals. That two-way communication does not exist in germ-free mice. So that fact alone is just a huge signal to us. Okay, focus on the microbiome when it comes to how able is our body able to communicate with itself, right? In terms of what it needs and building trust within the body. So, I think lifestyle, probiotics, all of those things absolutely contribute to the health of the brain. And, like you said, if it's inflammation, right, is really the cause, whether the inflammation is directly in the brain or elsewhere within the body, it's still just that same buzzword that we're fighting against. So that would be my answer. I mean, I think mental health is a really delicate topic.
Yeah.
And so I never, ever want to make anyone feel like, dismissed, but we live in a cage of our thoughts. And so, and we live in a cage of our body, 2 cages, right? All the physical things going on. And then we also have a brain that is trying to interpret everything that's ever happened to us. And if we didn't, our nervous system wasn't developed in a way where we have those skills, we're floundering until we do the work. And unfortunately, the healing of every single nervous system as an adult, anyone who's in therapy, it's really, really a movement from needing other people to regulate us or calm us down into figuring out how we can be okay with just the thoughts inside our own head, in our own presence, and in our own body. So we have to separate, right? Because you think about all of the people that are around us in our life, and that idea of being triggered, right, by our family relationships and our friendships. Those are the things that are absolutely contributing to that cage of thoughts that we're stuck in, right? When we make the actions of other people mean something about us, like we're not okay. If they're not okay with us, that's the work. And so, that again may be a little bit off topic, but that's really how I think about inflammation and this journey of healing our nervous system is this one big continuum of how can I figure out how to be okay within my body, self-trust, all of those things. And so it's one journey that's complex. But I think when we break it down and we simplify it, at least for me, and also the women that I've worked with, it becomes really less overwhelming than trying to tackle all of these issues all at one time. It's just one thing, this one journey that we're on. So that's what I would say.
Oh, yeah, we could actually go into the science behind how our cells actually adapt to the neuropeptides that they are exposed to more often. And so if we're constantly in this state of negative self-talk, then we're creating more neuropeptides surrounding that negative self-talk. And so if we can shift some of that to more positive self-talk and be okay in our own skin or in our own brain, like you're saying, then that can help to actually change the neuropeptides that are being produced, and therefore the cellular receptors that are there to accept those neuropeptides as cells divide and expand. But
and I think, it's not just positive self-talk, right? I mean, that's so simplistic. I often say, we can't move forward from where we are until we figure out why we are the way we are to begin with. Right. So it's a deep dive into our path. It's hard work. I'll just say that. So
deep introspection.
To really heal mind, body, spirit, in all of those ways, it's hard work. And I think as somebody who works with women, I often don't. I like going, oh, it'll be fine. I have this magic cure, right? Have you heard of essential oils? But it's actually one big invitation into a lifelong journey and hard work. But it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Last question to finish us off. What are the most promising areas of research in neuroimmunology, and how might future discoveries change the way we approach treatment for neuroimmune related conditions?
So I actually pulled up a study today that lists out, all of these different diseases: autism spectrum disorder, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, so on and so forth. And it talks about just the ratios of the different microbes in each of those conditions and how they're altered. And this review paper, I would highly recommend it, but it was actually specifically dealing with GABA, whether the levels of GABA are lower or higher. And so understanding that and learning how to supplement I mean, could it really be so simple if each disease has a unique signature in our gut, right? So that's a huge, that research is well on its way. It's really exciting. Take probiotics, right? Moral of the
Mm-hmm.
story, take a good probiotic. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, there was a paper that came out in Nature like about a year ago, and it was a research group from Yale. And I don't exactly understand how they did all of this, but they essentially looked at the vagus nerve and coded every single different organ because they wanted to understand how that communication was happening between the various organs and the body systems and the different neurons within the vagus nerve, right? And what they essentially found is that there's actually 3 different types of communication going all at one time, and they're all unique. So, which organ is being affected? Which tissue layer within that organ is being affected? And like the type of stimulus that's happening, whether it is a physical change, whether it's a nutrient depletion, whether there's inflammation going on. And the neurons within the vagus nerve, that network, were actually able to detect all of those changes independently. And they were the way I would describe it is they were assigned various functions. And so if you think about the more that we understand, right, how that communication is happening and how to alter it, that's hugely, hugely promising for tools that can be developed that can actually intervene in different conditions, right? Hypertension, epilepsy, depression, all of those things. And so I was just reminded of that when I was preparing for this podcast. So there's some really cool stuff happening because obviously this is a huge topic, the immune system and the nervous system. I mean, you can't separate the two. So
it sounds like there's more to come as researchers continue to explore that connection. And I like that you mentioned that study talking about the microbiome and the different in my book, Heal the Gut, Heal the Immune System, I call it microbial signatures for different diseases or conditions that are now being discovered. And it's so important to look at how we can positively influence those microbiomes to shift them away from the signature that's going to lead to a disease state or an illness. And
do you think that probiotics is the way to do that? Or I haven't read your book yet. What do you?
I think that's one of the ways. I also think that some of the most important things that your microbiome does is to produce metabolites like butyrate and urolithin. And these act as communication molecules that will then influence body activity. And so you can also go directly to those. You can now supplement with butyrate and urolithin, and there is some promising research so far on doing so in affecting the body in similar ways as if you were to supplement the microbiome. But I think also we've got to create the terrain for our microbiomes to thrive. And that has a lot to do with our diet and the lifestyle, but also to do with certain natural things that can promote. I'm not even talking about fiber being a prebiotic, but there are natural products that stimulate or help create this terrain for your microbiome to thrive, even though they are not prebiotics. So essential oils can act as that. There is some emerging research showing that certain essential oils can actually create that environment for your microbiome to thrive and have a positive environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I'll have to read your book.
Well, thanks, Dr. Poe, for being on. I think that there's been a lot of good information that's been shared, and hopefully people have found at least one thing that they can take away from this and start implementing, because it is baby steps. You're not going to shift your health overnight. If you're in a poor state of health or you're not where you want to be, it didn't happen overnight. It generally takes a long time, years for that to occur, sometimes decades. And so it's a slow process of restoring your health, but you can start implementing one thing and you can make a difference and then move on to the next thing and continue to have that progress forward. The most important thing is that you're always progressing forward and improving your health and stepping away from that state that you don't want to be in. So that's what I encourage you listeners to do. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for investing your precious time with us today. I trust you've uncovered valuable insights to elevate your health and enhance your quality of life. If you're hungry for more evidence-based wisdom to transform your well-being, I invite you to check out my 20-plus books, all waiting to be explored on my website, authorscott.com. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your knowledge. Please share, like, and subscribe to be part of the movement revolutionizing lives. In a world drowning in noise and endless information, your share can be the beacon that guides others to a better life. Together, let's make a difference by amplifying the life-changing knowledge you've gained today. Until next time, here's to your journey to boundless health and unbridled happiness.
Savior.